You just dropped these terms Web 2.0 and 3.0, and I think they're really important, and they probably also will take us right into what you're doing with Hedera Hashcraft. But if my mom's watching, she's 78, she's in San Diego. By the way, she's got a MetaMask wallet, thanks to me. She's got some stable coins, so we're getting there. My 17-year-old daughter has that as well. But if you had to explain to her, or when you bump into people on the streets, how do you explain to them this difference between Web 2.0 and 3.0, this kind of evolution from these few companies kind of controlling our information to the future where maybe it's more peer-to-peer or transparent or blockchain? How do you explain it?
Well, there are two parts to that answer. One is, when we think back to the 90s and the emergence of Web 1.0, I remember trying to explain to my parents what the World Wide Web is or was, right? And it was hard. They didn't really appreciate it until they began to use the applications on it. Email comes to mind, right? Once they started using email, then they got a sense for what it was. Now, alongside of Web 1.0, there were these walled gardens that we all remember, those of us that are old enough remember, Prodigy and CompuServe and AOL.
AOL. Yeah.
Right? Everyone remembers AOL. And they sort of predate in some ways Web 1.0. And then there are these stories where we saw that the tech giants back then, there's a famous story with Bill Gates. Bill Gates was building out their equivalent of an AOL or a CompuServe, and he agonized over this decision. Do I try to turn the ship and embrace these open standards that are HTML and HTTP, and or do I go the way of AOL? And he made the right decision, right? He turned the ship, and they, in 1995, they added TCP/IP to Windows 95 and introduced Internet Explorer to compete with Netscape.
Yeah.
And Web 1.0 was born. And then Web 2.0, for a lot of different reasons, didn't follow that same path. Right. What we see in Web 2.0 is the emergence of these tech giants, these primarily social media platforms that are walled gardens. We've got YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, and they didn't adopt the same kind of standards that made interoperability possible across social media. And Web 3.0 is an attempt to try and change that, to reintroduce standards that break down these walled gardens, not just in the social media platforms, but in other platforms as well that came out of Web 1.0. And that's how I tried to explain the differences between Web 1, 2, and 3. I'm sure we'll talk more about Web 3. But that's it. And, when I'm talking to my mom and dad about what is Web 3.0, it's going to end up being taking the same pattern as Web 1.0 did. They'll understand it when they start using the applications that run on top of it. And most of the population today has heard of NFTs. I think everyone's heard of Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is still only held by a relatively small number of people. My parents don't have Bitcoin. They're not experiencing Web 3.0 in that sense. They're not buying NFTs either, but a lot of people are, so the NFTs are sort of the gateway drug, if you will, into an understanding of what Web 3.0 is. That's how I would approach it.
Yeah, that's a great explanation, and I might just go down that thread a little bit. But I remember sending my first email in 1989. It was that at mit.edu, and I sent, it was called the Athena Project Athena at MIT, and I sent an email to my brother who was at Stanford, and then, Mance, I didn't use it for 3-4 years. I didn't use it, but funny enough, my grandma started sending emails a few years later, so because she could sense the utility, even though she was in her 70s, I get this point, in Phoenix, Arizona. So like you said, people could see that utility from email, but email is a great description. And actually, I had Andreas Antonopoulos here many years ago, and he said, our first experience of the internet was email, and we thought, this is cool, but is that it? And he used to compare Bitcoin to that. We had one thing we could do with it. But when we saw the browser, we said, oh, wow, internet is this. And then when we saw, social media interaction and upload, and we saw, okay, that 2.0. And now we're seeing this incredible kind of peer-to-peer decentralized like blockchain version. And I guess in the ideal world going forward is your parents and my parents will use it and maybe not even know they're using it. Maybe that means that
That's exactly right. I mean,
tech.
what we're building is just infrastructure. It's plumbing, right? It's not meant to be seen. In fact, it's successful if you never think about it. If you have to think about it, then there's still problems. And it's the applications and the benefits that the applications bring to individuals and businesses that will, that's the promise of Web 3.0 and what we're all hoping to achieve. But we shouldn't think about it.